We go.
Okay.
We are here with Dewey Hudson. He was the longtime district attorney in Onslow County during the time where Maria Lauterbach was murdered by another Marine who was subsequently convicted. Dewey, talk to me a little bit about how you first learned about this case that happened. Wow, we're going on close to 20 years ago.
I first learned about it when my chief assistant district attorney, who's now the district attorney in Onslow, Ernie Lee, called me and told me that um, I needed to get to Onslow County. I had 4 counties in my prosecutorial district, and he briefly told me what was going on, and I traveled to Onslow as quick as I could to get there to a massive the whole world of news media, and then Ernie briefed me about what had transpired that morning.
So what did you learn, Dewey, in the initial stages regarding the crime that had taken place?
Do you want me to tell you about the issue with Sheriff Brown or the crime in general?
Well, let's start with the crime and then we'll go to
Okay.
the issue. So when Ernie Lee briefed you on it, what did you know as you kind of drove into
Okay.
Jacksonville that day?
Well, I talked to him when I got to Jacksonville, um, and I learned that the circumstances that Maria Lauterbach, that the sheriff was getting ready to confirm that she was in fact dead. Uh, and Ernie told me, I asked him, I said, "Well, have they recovered the body?" He said, "No, they have not recovered the body." And he briefly told me that about her, um, Cesar Laurean had admitted to his wife that she had committed suicide and he had taken the body and buried it in the woods across from his home. And of course, that's when I asked, "Have they recovered the body?" He said, "No." And I said, "The sheriff has announced that she's been killed." He said, "Yeah." I was sort of shocked because I'm like, what if she's not? And but later on, then we talked to the sheriff, and we went out to the defendant's residence, Lauren's residence, and the sheriff briefed me on what he thought was the body buried in the backyard.
And this is an unusual case because you are basically coming to a crime that's taking place in the city of Jacksonville, although these were two Marines. Talk to me a little bit about the fact of Sheriff Ed Brown sort of, stating that Maria was dead, but you really had no evidence of that yet. It was a bit premature, right?
Oh, it's even worse than that because initially that morning, the sheriff was going to make an announcement that it was a hoax, that she was in fact alive and had been seen by various people in Jacksonville with Lauren, and that she was not dead. And just before he was very fortunate because just before he made that statement, that's when he learned that the Cesar Lauren's wife was there, and she at that time told the story which I just related, that her husband had confessed that he had no, he confessed that what he confessed to was that she committed suicide. That's right, and that he took the body and buried it in the woods. And so it went from the sheriff saying that she was alive when in fact she could have been dead to now saying that she's dead when she could have been alive in Myrtle Beach, as far as we knew at that point. Um, he was very fortunate. He was very fortunate that, well, I wouldn't say he was fortunate. It'd been lot better for all of us if he was wrong during this press conference. In fact, she were alive, but for him, he was he would look really silly if when he announced that she was dead premature, that in fact she was elsewhere alive.
So you showed up at Cesar Laurean's house in Onslow County, and obviously this was an active crime scene with investigators crawling all over this place, including in the backyard. Walk me through some of the things that really stood out to you when you were kind of perusing that whole area.
Well, first I talked to Sheriff Brown, and he went through how he found the body or the burial site with, let's see, what is that gadget he used?
A divining rod.
a dividing rod, right? So he was telling me all about that, and yeah, I thought it was a little bit silly because the only spot that she could have been buried, the whole yard was grass except for where the fire pit was. So I don't see, like that would be the obvious place that you would look with it with his ground that's broken. And so anyhow, he was telling me all about that, and then we went over to where the burial pit was, and we had some more conversations about what to do there.
Did you walk through the home? I mean, I remember seeing crime scene video later and autopsy results that there was blood splattered throughout the entire home
Well,
prior to her
no,
being.
no, that's not exactly true. There was drops of blood that were found in the garage where we contend the murder occurred. As far as I remember, there was no blood inside the home. I think it just appeared that, the whole crime occurred inside of the garage, his garage.
So I remember folks coming in from, I believe it might have been Virginia, coming in to excavate the body, correct?
Yeah, that was another ordeal if you want me to go into it. When we were out there, of course, the body, we couldn't see any part of the body, and the sheriff wanted to take a shovel and start digging up the crime scene. And I had NIS and the SBI and the sheriff's department and everybody in the world was there. And they disagreed with the sheriff. They didn't want that. They wanted to bring the NIS wanted to bring one of their experts from, I believe, Norfolk down to preserve the body and like you do an archaeological dig, which is what I told them we need to do. And at that point, they actually, you want me to go on with this or you want me? Okay. So we overruled the sheriff and told him we need to do the dig. They in fact found some bone fragments initially that day, late that afternoon. And was it was wintertime, and so just it gets dark early. It did get dark early. And they wanted me to authorize issuing warrants for the murder. And I remember asking them, anyone here can confirm that these are human remains? Because I've been through this before where it turned out not to be human, but a deer floating in a river. And no one could assure me they were human remains. And I'm like, I don't think I can be issued a warrant for arrest. And like I was saying earlier, and then turn out that that's a pig bones or something from a pig cookout. And that he and she end up in Myrtle Beach, that would be ridiculous. So I told him until someone can assure me there were human remains, I could not do that. So it was dark that night, and so everybody decided in best interest was to, preserve the crime scene to the next morning when they could do a proper dig and recover the remains, which is what happened.
So at this time, though, when the dig is going on, what do you know to be the whereabouts of Cesar Laurean, who is speculated to have committed this murder, and then his wife? What do you know at this point about the scope of this whole, who this guy is and where he's at? You know already he's a Marine.
It was very limited at that time. My best recollection is obviously we didn't know that he had gone to Raleigh, Durham, and ultimately took a bus from there to Texas and then to Mexico. We didn't know any of that. We just knew that he had taken I believe it was his truck, and had fled that morning, earlier that morning. And of course, she disappeared. I believe it was on the 20th of December when she left her note with a roommate that she was basically going to AWOL or leaving the Marine Corps. So we knew she had disappeared. But at that time, we really didn't know her whereabouts. Well, we did then, because we strongly suspect that her remains were in the ground at that time.
Did you know about the relationship that the two of them were having? Were you briefed on that?
Yes, yes, I was briefed. I'm sure I was briefed on that by Ernie and others and NIS that they had been investigating him from alleged rape that allegedly occurred on base outside of my jurisdiction, and that NIS was investigating it, and that he was suspect in that allegation of rape. So I knew all about that, and I knew they had an order that he was not supposed to have any contact with her at that time.
So then what happened? So you've got the folks from Norfolk coming down to sort of dig up the body to confirm, in fact, that it is human remains, which would then prompt you to issue a warrant for someone's arrest at this point. What then transpired?
Well, the next morning that in fact happened, and they were able to confirm that it was human remains. And at that point, we did authorize the issuance of warrants for arrest for a murder.
Okay, so that occurs, but then you figure out that Cesar Laurean, the suspect who you believe, killed her and put her in this fire pit, uh, but you don't know where he's at.
Correct.
So what happened next?
A few days later, of course, this case received not only a lot of publicity in North Carolina, it's a national case at this point. Had been a national case before, because the mother, Maria Lauterbach, had been on Today's Show, and it had received a lot of publicity about the way the Marine Corps has handled the alleged rape case. So, the whole country was sort of watching this case. And consequently, there was a hotel at the Raleigh-Durham airport that someone spotted his truck had been sitting out there in the parking lot for several days. And sure enough, when they ran the license tag, that was in fact his truck.
So go ahead. So you spot his truck at the Raleigh-Durham airport
Right.
immediately.
So then we were trying to figure out whether or not he had taken a flight, obviously. And make a long story short, we subsequently learned that he didn't take a flight, but he in fact had taken a public bus to, I believe it was, I think it was El Paso. It's been a long time, but it was somewhere in Texas near the border. And from there, he had fled over to Mexico.
So at this point, you know that the suspect, who you believe is a suspect, is out of the country. At what point, though, Dewey, did you figure out that Maria Lauterbach was in fact pregnant?
We knew that before. She had told NIS that she was 7 months pregnant. Her mama confirmed that she was pregnant, so we knew she was pregnant from the get-go.
Did anybody know that it was Cesar Laurean's baby?
No, they didn't. I mean, the NIS they got a lot of heat in Marine Corps, but I think a lot of it was not justified initially. I had some concerns about later on. They were a little bit initially had no problems with them, not because of the note and circumstances of her saying that she was leaving the Marine Corps and all of her history with the Marine Corps, that they were justified about that. So I knew all about that. I've been told all about the circumstances with their investigation, and that they were putting it on hold. In all honesty, it was not the strongest rape allegation. In fact, truthfully, it was very weak. She claimed that she had had sex with him voluntarily prior to this alleged rape date, and that on the date of the rape, she claimed that they were at work. He was a corporal, she was a private, so she was under his command, and that he took her into the washroom after everybody left and had sex with her, but he used no weapon, and she immediately reported it. So, my experience is those cases are very, very difficult to win. But the Marine Corps, they did investigate. There were more than just a rape allegation. They had issues. Number one, he was married, and they frown on adultery in the Marine Corps, particularly if it's among their Marines. I mean, you can understand that, and also the fact that he was command over her. So those, even if the rape was not justified, he had serious problems with the Marine Corps over those two circumstances, and he was aware of all that. Even rape. And I think if it weren't for that, he probably would have admitted, my theory is all along that he denied having sex with him, because he realized if he admitted having sex, even if it was consensual sex, his Marine Corps career would at least be gone. He'd be court-martialed.
as you're putting all of these pieces together, learning about the players in the game, kind of expanding the web as you do as a prosecutor, working with investigators, what were you trying to figure out in terms of, or what did you figure out or surmise as to what the motive behind this crime was?
Well, our argument and our contentions, even at the trial, was that he murdered her because she was going to reveal to the world, and he was concerned that he was the father of the child. I'm sure. I mean, he didn't say that, but that's our contention. That at that point, he thought he was the father of the child. That once the child had been born, he would be in some serious problems. And also, I really believe this happened at the defendant's house. You know, his wife and children were at a Christmas party on base. And, you know, it's just our opinion, and, you know, something that we argue to the jury is that she she was she realized that although she bought a ticket to go to Mexico from the bus station, and unfortunately there was no bus leaving that day that she was killed. The next one would be the following day, and that she realized that he was sending her off to Mexico, but he wasn't going to go to Mexico with her. And so I think that a tremendous argument occurred there in the garage about that. And you know, I'm speculating because we really don't know. He never admitted to it. And of course, she is not alive to tell us what happened. So we got to try to put all the pieces together. And our best contention and best argument was that she told him that, hey, you know, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to tell your wife all about this. And at that point, he went berserk and picked up the crowbar and killed her.
So the
I
murder
think,
weapon was a crowbar. He struck her, and then, as much as you can go into, pretty disturbing details from there on out, right?
oh yeah, it was. I mean, that crowbar, it's not a regular household crowbar. That was an industrial military crowbar. In fact, I had problems even lifting it up in court. It was so heavy. I think they worked on like military tanks and catapults. It was very heavy. But he had it in his shop and he did that and he hit her over the head and killed her. Um, and he didn't dispose of the body that day. He didn't dispose of the body for several days thereafter. In fact, we understand that he put the body under I believe it was like a John boat that he had outdoors. He hid it there for several days because yeah, it's not very pleasant to go into. But some of the neighbors going back in time realized during that period of time their dogs were going to their fence because they had a big fence around the backyard and were just going crazy barking because you know we contend that you know they were smelling the dead body there in the yard. And then so that's where we're there.
So then obviously he burns the body to try to get rid of the evidence.
Correct. So then we began the sheriff's department did a really good job after they got involved. This particular detective, I can't remember his name, but he did a really good job. Someone had reported that her cell phone was located on the highway, on the side of the highway near the entrance to the Camp Lejeune. And then we found out that her credit cards were missing and that he in fact had gone to the credit union and tried to withdraw money. Although he, tried to hide his face, you could tell it was him because he didn't do a very good job of disguising his face. So that's really incriminating. Then we had evidence where he'd gone to Lowe's with a neighbor and bought all the instruments that were used to bury the body and all that sort of stuff, for the fire pit. So we at that point had a pretty strong circumstantial case that he was guilty of the crime, pretty strong.
So now at this point, your suspect has crossed the border and is into Mexico. Unusual for you as a prosecutor and as DA at this point. Now you've got really sort of an international manhunt kind of at your fingertips.
That's correct. At that point, the marshals normally are the ones who get involved in that process. For I don't know if you want to go into detail, but somehow the FBI took over that part of trying to capture him. Although, as I've indicated, and I'm sure you're aware, the marshals are usually that's their primary function. It's the apprehended fugitives, but the FBI, in fact, did it. And
So remind me
it
again,
was a long,
he was gone for quite
okay.
some time, and him sending letters in an internet cafe in
Oh,
Mexico
yeah.
to his wife was sort of the smoking gun for you to find him, or for the FBI,
Well,
I should say.
well, we knew at that point that the FBI had tracked him by, by the, getting on getting on his bus, and then El Paso, and a ticket from El Paso to Mexico. So we pretty much knew he was in the country of Mexico. But the next difficulty was getting the Mexican authorities to help us.
And one of the reasons was, I guess I should say, why was that so difficult? Obviously, one of the reasons too is they probably wanted you to take the death penalty off the table. We can go into that as well. I mean, that was a really big part of this, and a roadblock to get him extradited back to North Carolina, ultimately when he was found in an avocado field of all things.
My understanding, the Mexican authorities, they wouldn't have arrested him if he walked into the police department unless I agreed to not seek the death penalty. When John F. Kennedy was president in 1960, he entered a treaty with Mexico that we would not seek the death penalty of anyone who fled to Mexico and they extradited back to the United States. So here we are with that. That we had a dilemma, and we debated that for a while, whether or not we were willing to relinquish that authority to Mexico. We felt like that should be ultimately a jury of 12 people decide that, not Mexico. We even debated, thinking that we tried several things out before we did that. In fact, one of them we were trying to figure out, if there were evidence to charge his wife with any involvement in this, that maybe he would be willing to surrender and come back, to try to help his wife. We looked very hard at that, but truthfully, and I know it was very controversial at the time. A lot of people felt like that she was involved, blah, blah, blah. We wanted to just charge her with some type of accessory after the fact, accessory after before the fact. We couldn't, because there was no evidence of that. Now, there were letters back and forth, but to be accessory after the fact, number one, you got to know that the crime has been committed, and the person you're assisting committed the crime, or know that, which existed, but you got to be able to do something to help them. And there was no evidence that she did anything. She didn't send him any money. Sure enough, they were writing back and forth. But I think her attorney probably had cautioned her about the legalities of all of this and what she could do and she couldn't do, because she walked with a straight and narrow line. She didn't cross over that. So there's no way that we could have charged her, I mean, with valid evidence. I mean, we certainly want to frame her. So we couldn't do that. And that went on for a while, and we were the FBI was in the sheriff's, somebody was intercepting the letters from their mailbox. So they were reading his letters. We had access to his letters and her letters. So we couldn't do that. So the next thing we said, well, why don't we just wait it out, and eventually he'll probably come back over, we can capture him then. And then I'm like, well, fine. So we do that. What happens if he comes back over and kills somebody else? So that's another horrific crime. And so, make a long story short, we just realized that to get him back, we'd have to concede that we would not seek the death penalty. And all this time, I'm dealing with the State Department. I'm not dealing with Mexico myself. It's going through the United States State Department. So, we conveyed that we would not seek the death penalty.
So then ultimately, kind of what happens from there after you took the death penalty off the table?
Well, we know for a while, and the FBI did a good job, as they actually apprehended him in Mexico. And I can't remember the name of the state, but it's the one where all the cartels, the outlaw state in Mexico. And it's one where I'm serious that at that time, the government didn't go into that part of Mexico. In fact, they would be killed. Um, and that's where he was. And they found him because he would go. They put a trace on the Jacksonville Daily News website. And how many people in Mexico is going to go to a internet bar and an internet cafe and search the Jacksonville Daily News? I mean, very few people. How many? And sure enough, they were able to locate him through that. And then once they did, in fact, apprehend him, um, from my understanding from talking with the FBI agent later on during the trial, he informed me of all the background, how that occurred. It was very interesting. In fact, you could do a whole podcast on just how that occurred. It was unbelievable. Uh, the cartel said, "You come here and we'll release him." And why they would be concerned about a murder being in their presence, since that's all they are themselves, pretty much, is beyond me. But they didn't want him; they want to get rid of him. So they agreed that the Mexican government could, in fact, go to their state in Mexico, and they would release him to him. And this agent, which I can't remember his name, but he was telling me initially the Mexican government was going to send like a caravan of police officers down there to arrest him. He said, absolutely no. The last time you did that, they ambushed and killed a whole bunch, like 15 or 20 of them, and threw them in a well. That's how brutal that was. And he said, if we do that again, they're going to think we're here more for not Cesar Laurean, but the rest of them drug kingpin. And no, we just do 2 or 3. And that's what they did. And they actually got him back and got him back into their custody. And then the ordeal of now, they finally arrested him and got him under in jail. Now, how to get him back to America, that's another chapter.
Ultimately, he comes back to America. He's tried for first-degree murder in front of a jury of 12 peers. Talk to me in brief, sort of about that trial, how that went for you.
I think you need to talk a little bit about how we got him back. That's to me, I think
Okay,
that's
we can do that. Hold on. So this
okay.
meeting is going to end in 9 minutes. When it
Oh,
does,
okay.
click back into the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, will
So
do.
obviously, you're having to go through a lot of different hoops to get Cesar Laurean back into the United States, back into North Carolina, where he's
Right.
ultimately going to face trial. How did that work?
Um, yeah, I assumed it was going to be a process just like we do, going through the legal process and all of that. And it went on and on and on and on and on for months. And finally, we got word that he was going to be, that they had decided to, in fact, extradite him back to America. And I think he was going to go to, somewhere in Texas. I can't remember if it was Houston or Dallas, and that our people were going to meet there and take custody of him there. And when they got there, they realized the Mexican authorities had changed their mind, was sending it to Orlando. So now they got to catch a plane to Orlando. And they do. And when they get there, they found that this is sort of humorous, but that there was a plane not only with Lauren, but quite a few other drug pens of people that the federal government, not us, but the Fed that we wanted back. And they were on the plane along with a bunch of dignitaries from Mexico and their family, members of their family who were going to Disney World. So I guess even they learned how to mix work and pleasure. So yeah, we get him. So that after we go through all that, they finally get him back to Jacksonville. He's, in our jail. The funny thing is about all this, that you know the reporter, there was a reporter in Jackson Daily News. I remember he asked me, he said, President Obama just went to Mexico City. You think that had anything to do with the extradition of Lauren? I said, no, didn't have anything. It's just a way, just coincidental. And then he actually called the embassy, Mexican embassy in D.C., Washington, D.C., and they verified that that was what happened, that Mexico has a just gesture of goodwill to President Obama, released all these people for him, for him to go to Mexico City and honor that country. So much for the legal system in Mexico, I guess.
And so then he's obviously in the jail as you and your
Right.
team prepare for this trial. Walk me through that. The length of the trial, any surprises, um, any confession or admission by him during that point?
No, he had initially he claimed that, as I've gone through before, that she committed suicide, which was ridiculous. I mean, he claimed she cut her throat, but she was killed by, not that at all. And then next he wrote letters, I believe, to his wife saying something about the cartel killed her over, like, it was just BS. It was not like incredible. So he gave two or three different, versions of what happened to her, two or three different stories. And of course, in trial, he didn't testify. We moved it from Jacksonville, the court did, to Wayne County, 2 counties over. I'm not sure that was, I mean, everybody in the world was, where were you gonna move that case if people weren't talking about it? Yeah, so we moved it up to Wayne County in August of 2010. We tried it there with a Wayne County jury, and yeah, truthfully, he didn't testify. There's nothing really shocking about that at all. I mean, as I've indicated before, this is pretty much a open and shut case based on circumstantial evidence. It's about as strong as you get. But anything happen. I mean, I wouldn't say it's strong. It wasn't as strong as O.J. Simpson trial. So, but anything could happen. But so we went overboard, and and the Marine Corps was very accommodating. They brought a lot of people back we were at war then, and they brought a lot of people back from the Middle East, Marines that we needed to testify during this trial. And I don't remember how long it lasted. It was more than a week. It was several weeks, but it wasn't as long as it would have been if we had death qualify the jury, but we didn't because we weren't seeking the death penalty. And another reason we didn't want to give up the death penalty because there's our bargaining power. What are we going to offer now? You plead guilty to first degree murder, take life, or you can go to trial, let the jury convict you, get life. So, I mean, we couldn't offer him like 20 years for this horrible murder. And if there was a death penalty, there's a strong likelihood at that point, and I'm not saying we would have, because we never got around to discuss it with the family, but there's a strong possibility and probability that we would have probably negotiated first degree life without parole. Because in reality, that's probably what the jury would have done. He had no prior record. And the likelihood of him ever being put to death in North Carolina was very remote. But we didn't have that. So now we got to try the case. And that's the reason we had to try the case, because of the fact that Mexico made us, take the death penalty off.
Ultimately, what did the jury decide?
They found him guilty of first degree murder. It wasn't, didn't take long at all for them to do that.
So, looking back almost 20 years, what stands out the most to you about this case? Obviously, this is one that garnered so much national and local media attention. It had so many different twists and turns. It had the Mexico component.
Mhm. What turned out is that, number one, we hadn't gotten into that, but after the death, the Marine Corps, they wanted to find out who the father of this child was. Who's the father? And I hate to say anything disparaging about someone who's dead, but the truth is the truth. Let's just say there were a lot of other possibilities of it. And the Marine Corps, in fact, brought a bunch of them back to do DNA. Brought them back from war zones to do DNA. And after a while, they couldn't find who the father was, and we never did. As far as I know, they never determined who the father of that fetus was. I think things that bother me, number one, I think they did change the law in North Carolina, if my memory, because that baby was pretty much, if memory is correct, was pretty much viable. That baby could have lived, but I couldn't charge for the death of the fetus at that time. That was disturbing. And the circumstances are, so here he is. what he killed her if he just waited a couple more months than when the baby been born. And they found out he's not father the baby. That had been it. None of this would occur. That's the tragedy of all of this. And now Lauren was an excellent Marine based on the Marine Corps. He was excellent. He loved the Marine Corps, and she did not have that same record in the Marine Corps. I don't know if I want to go into a lot of detail, but she had some rough dealings in the Marine Corps. In fact, I'm so surprised that she continued to be a Marine. Um, I think that's the tragedy of it all, is that why? I mean, if he just waited out 3 months, did a DNA, he'd probably be a sergeant in the Marine Corps now, and none of this would have happened. That's the tragedy of all of it. This is not, he didn't plan to kill her. He had a pistol in his bedroom. If he had a plan on killing her, I doubt seriously if he would have beat her to death in his garage. But obviously he intended to kill her, and the jury found that was, be first degree murder. You don't have to plan it for a week. It has to be intentional. You have to intend. And it can be a second. Premeditation can be a second, and it certainly was. And they didn't find second degree; they found first degree murder. And that's sort of the tragic part about this is, like so many murders, like why? He just ruined his life, ruined her life, ruined his members of his family. And he had a real good family. I saw quite a few on that court.
And a young
And,
daughter.
yeah, and all that for what? Just that's the sad part of it all. And all another thing is the mystery of this case is we still don't know what happened.